cow. And people literally drive there as if they were training for a Jason Statham action flick. You know what I'm saying? I'm not exaggerating. I mean, maybe very slightly. But this includes those people that drive the buses, including the double buses, the others, and so forth and so on. And so it's a whole different world. Plus, the other issue with driving is that, of course, you have to learn to drive on the left side of the road. All right? So if you're accustomed to driving on the right side of the road, that takes some adjustment too. Point being that it was very different and physically very taxing, and it has always amazed me, all 3 times that I've been there, the people that are there and their love, their devotion, their dedication to this teaching. There were people, for example, the dean of the Spanish Town class loaned us her car for all 19 days. And that's pretty big, right? And of course, we were putting 5 people, sometimes 6, into that car. You can only have 2 in the front, and that means sometimes 4 people had to squeeze into the back, which was not a very big car. And yes, that means you may have to sit on somebody's lap. And of course, when you're going over the roads where you hit bump, 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 bump like this, and sitting on the hump in the middle in the back on somebody's lap and so forth, it's a whole different experience, whole different world. No such thing as air conditioning and 80 plus degrees with humidity, right? So I know you all say, oh, gee, how nice, right? Because I know it was cold here during that period of time. We kept trying to ship some of that heat back, but for some reason, I don't know, the Postal Service just didn't seem to work it so well. But even at that, there were people, well, in the standard of living and so forth, it's a whole different world. I don't want to go into spend a lot of time with all of it, but the reason I'm mentioning this is because there is such a preponderance percentage of the people that have an incredible appreciation for the gospel. And they sacrifice, they go out of their way to do whatever they can in order to get to class, in order to learn, in order to help others get to class, in order to help us to get around and go. And, you know, as many people as possible, they wanted to go with us. And some of them did, so in some cases we had, you know, a couple of different vehicles and several different people, and, you know, we would go up into the mountains and out in the boondocks and so forth. There's one place which is kind of famous, it's called Manchineal, and we go out there, Frank's been going out there I think for almost 20 years now, and there's 2 guys out there in particular that show up like dependably like clockwork. The one guy turns 100 this month, and he is still walking up and down the mountain to his house and then down into the little town area. What we do there is we'll go and just find an area on the street in a building and then hang the chart on the building out in front of a shop area and so forth and start street preaching. And people will gather around and listen and so forth. And this guy that goes up the mountain, everybody calls him Moses. And so Moses is climbing the mountain and at the age of 100. It's amazing. And then the guy that's with him is Nicholas, okay? So forth. So that's one place we've got to go. And people come around and listen, and, you know, you do that. And then there's other people in places and so forth other than the main classes. But it's really interesting, like in the one major class in Kingston, you literally can squeeze 2 rows of chairs in there. And I mean, the one row is right against the back wall, and then the other row is pretty close to it, and you've got maybe about that much space between the front row and where you have to stand for the charts. And And while we were there wasn't a day that the class wasn't full and people out the door, standing outside trying to listen. And, so this was quite something. And by the way, most of the chairs there, does everybody remember the chairs that you have in kindergarten? Right? That's basically most of the chairs that everybody has to sit on. And then the other main class in Spanish Town is in the public school, and the facilities there are pretty good because they're the public school. But even then, it's quite interesting. Anyway, so. And we ran them out of that classroom one night. The last night that we were there, the last class we were there, the dean there told us that they'd never seen as many people come to class on a weekday, on a Tuesday night. Filled the room, and they were basically standing outside. So the people care. And they were there, they wanted to learn, they had questions, they wanted to go into different things, and they wanted to be involved. They sacrificed a lot. One guy who's always been a tremendous help, I can't imagine how he's physically able to do what he does, but he's been working apparently many days, 12 hours a day, hard labor, and what he would end up doing as many days as he possibly could if he was working at night and got off in the morning, he would try to catch a bus and come over to the house where we were staying and show up at our house in the morning and be with us as long as he could. There was one day when he got a chance to get off work for a second shift, got off a second shift, and during that day, he ended up going with us and driving. And on several of the other days, what he did was he helped us do repairs on the car. We had to end up getting tires and ball joints and other kinds of things, in order to make the car roadworthy. And he helped do the repairs and other kinds of things and so forth. And then he has to go right back to work. So, I don't know when he slept. The amazing amount of commitment, dedication. So really, doesn't that teach an awful lot just by action? I mean, it really shows the love, the dedication, so forth, and the atmosphere, the care there is great. And I could go through other stories of different people, but it's just, it's pretty amazing, and it's rewarding when you can go and really help somebody spiritually where they obviously are in need, they want it, and it's beneficial, so forth. So there was a lot that was done, and it was very rewarding and very worthwhile, not only for us, but I will say this, I was at one point exhausted to the point, I've never really had this happen before, but after one class, anyway, after one class, I nearly collapsed. And but a lot of heat, because there was no heat relief. And of course, I'm used to sub-zero temperatures, right? You go over in that. So no heat relief, and I'm standing on my feet for hours, preaching and doing other things, and becoming dehydrated more and more and more and so forth. So at the one point, finally I realized, okay, the body's had enough. But thankfully, the next day, we didn't have to do a double. I got a chance to rest a little and recover for a few hours and so forth. So I'm afraid this body is getting old. Yeah. What was that? Yeah. Yes, it is. So that's the way it is. But it was a wonderful thing, and if you ever want to go do a very wonderful kind of a ministry, that would be one place to do it. But before you do that, I very sincerely recommend that you make absolute, complete plans, okay? Don't just decide, oh, I'm going over there, okay? make some plans, make arrangements, because you want to be with the locals. If you don't really know what's going on, where to go, where not to go, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, etc., you need to make sure you are with the locals. Okay? Make sense? So, have a wonderful vacation, but make some arrangements, okay? What's that? It's not a vacation. No, it is not a vacation. It's very, very, very extremely hard work. But it's also wonderful. Yeah, it is. So anyway, okay. We were reading Ezekiel, the 8th chapter, at the beginning here, and we might as well cover that a little bit because the book of Ezekiel is kind of interesting, and it shows a lot about Yahweh's purpose. The 8th chapter is kind of a good place to look at and kind of connect that in with some other things. So while I've been gone, have you talked about the book of Ezekiel much? You've been reading the book of Ezekiel, but you haven't really talked about it much. So let's go into it just a little bit. If you start at the 8th chapter, read starting at the beginning, and then we'll kind of go into a few things here.
Ezekiel 8:1. And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I sat in mine house, and the elders of Judah sat before me, that the hand of Yahweh Elohim fell there upon me.
Hey, does anybody have any idea where Ezekiel is? It's in his house, but where is that?
In Judah? In the temple?
David is the resident historian. Does he know?
He's probably in Jerusalem. I don't think he's necessarily been taken.
Has he been taken captive yet in Babylon?
There was some part that talked about going to the river Shabar.
Right.
Which is out there in Babylon.
Right, exactly. And so Ezekiel and the people of Judah have been taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar, and they are in Babylon, and they're captive there. And Yahweh has told them, and you read this in the book of Jeremiah, that it was going to happen, and that they were going to be there. And do you remember for how long? 70 years. And in Jeremiah, it says they would be there for 70 years. They would be held captive in Babylon for 70 years. Just like, remember, Yahweh told Abraham that his children would inherit the promised land, but first they would have to go down into bondage, and they would be held captive there for how long? 400 years. They were actually there for 430 years, right, from the promise until the time that they came out. Yahshua appeared down there at the end of 400 years, but they actually physically exited or took their exodus 430 years afterwards. Now, do you realize that Yahweh repeats by the pattern? Right? So you've got a captivity in the law in Egypt. You've got a captivity in the testimony in Babylon. Right? Now they're down here for 430 years. They're going to be in Babylon for how long? 70 years. Now, let's do a little divine numerology. 430. The numerals are 430. Right? I could write it on the board, but please add up the numerals 4, 3, and 0. You get 70, or 7, right? Okay? So, in principle, they're down there for 70 years, or for basically one cycle, because Yahweh does things in cycles of 7. So they're going to be down here for a cycle of 7. They're going to be in Babylonian captivity for a cycle of 7, and then Yahweh's going to bring them out. Now, when Yahweh brings them out of captivity in Egypt, who is the man that is their leader? Moses. But there is also another man with him, and that man happens to be actually causing everything to happen. And who is that man?
Joshua.
Joshua, or Yahshua, the son of Nun, who is really who?
Yahweh.
Yahweh Elohim in a body. Okay? So now when they come out of Babylonian captivity, okay, and they come out in order to build the temple, there is a delegation that is sent to build the temple in Jerusalem. Who is the leader, the man that's given the commission in order to build the temple? Zerubbabel, right? And you have over on this chart here, shows the 490-year cycles that Yahweh works everything, because 490 is 77s, okay? Yahweh's working these things in cycles of 7 and so forth, or 70s. And you have at the end of a 490-year cycle the dedication of the temple of Zerubbabel in 510 years before the birth of Yahshua the Messiah. So Zerubbabel's temple is dedicated at the end of a 490-year cycle, and that's after they come out of the captivity in Babylon. Okay? Now, when they come out of the captivity in Egypt, they eventually go into the Promised Land, right? And they build a temple here, right? How many years is it until they dedicate this temple? 490 years. So at the end of a 490-year cycle, the temple of Yahweh is dedicated in the, in their Exodus in the law. At the end of a 490-year cycle, after their Exodus that you read about in the testimony, a temple is dedicated. Do you see a pattern? Of course. But what does this show? What it shows is that in Yahweh's purpose, which goes from eternity to eternity, that at the end of His purpose, He will dedicate the temple of His body in a glorified fashion. But first, before that takes place, you have to have the fulfillment of it. So you had the institution with the Exodus here in the law. You had the testimony, the confirmation of it with the Exodus that you're reading about in the testimony. And what is the fulfillment of the dedication of that temple at the end of a 490-year cycle? What is it? It's Yahshua doing what, though? It's Yahshua dedicating the church or the temple of His spiritual body on the day of Pentecost. Okay? And this is at the end of a 490-year cycle, which began, and it's shown back here on this chart. That 490-year cycle began with an event called the Edict of Artaxerxes. Okay? And that was 457 years before his birth, and of course he had 33 years of his life. So 457 plus 33 is what? 490 years, and at the end of a 490-year cycle, Pentecost, or the dedication of the church or the spiritual temple or body of Yahshua the Messiah, in fulfillment of the Exodus out of bondage and the dedication of the temple, the Exodus out of bondage that you're reading about in the testimony, and the dedication of the Zerubbabel temple, right? And all those at the end of a 490-year cycle, or at the end of 7 days, or a cycle of 7. And as I mentioned, Moses was leading them, but Yahshua, the son of Nun, which was Yahweh Elohim, he is the one that was really behind it. He had to take them in to the Promised Land. Moses couldn't do it. Zerubbabel was the one that was given the commission to build this temple, but who became the high priest and who is the second person listed in the group of people that come out of Babylonian captivity? Joshua, right? So Zerubbabel is the leader, Joshua is right behind him, and Joshua becomes the priest. And his name is called Joshua, or written in other places because of translations and so forth as Jeshua. And he's called the son of Jehozadek, or Jehozadek. So Yahshua is the one behind it, and he is the one that if you read there that you find that he saw, the prophet was shown a vision of Yahshua the son of Jehozadek, the high priest, clothed in filthy garments. In Zechariah, that's exactly right. And he was clothed in filthy garments, but then he came along and the filthy garments were taken away and he was given clean and glorious garments. What does that show you? What does that show? It shows Yahshua the Messiah coming down in the likeness of sinful flesh and taking the sins of the world on that physical body. Follow me? The physical body became a filthy garment. It took the sins of the world upon him. And that physical body was then put on the cross. He died, he was buried, and that's where the body was burned up. And when he raised, he did not raise a physical body. He raised a glorious, quickening spirit. So now you see the clean garments and so forth of Yahshua, the Messiah, in fulfillment of what happened in that vision with Yahshua, the son of Jehozadak. Make sense? Clear? Okay. So, let's read on a little bit here in Ezekiel so you see where he is, what's going on, and that gives you a little context to it. Please continue.
Then I beheld, and lo, a likeness as the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his loins even downward, fire, and from his loins even upward, as the appearance of brightness, as the color of amber.
All right, now, he sees a vision, the vision of a man-like figure. And he's got the appearance of fire from his loins down and from his loins up, and great brightness. Right? Okay? All right. Does that sound familiar? With what? Okay? Let's go back here to this Exodus. Who led them? Well, remember I told you about that Joshua the son of Nun. But Joshua the son of Nun also appeared there in an angelic form. Right? And you read back there that, and I could get you Exodus 13:21, Exodus 14th chapter, Exodus 23rd chapter, and various ones, and some of them are listed right here on the chart. But it says Yahweh went before Israel and led them by day in a what? In the form of a pillar of a cloud, but by night it became a what? A pillar of fire, right? Now that's the appearance of fire. From his loins downward, from his loins upward. It doesn't say that this was a ball of fire. It says it was a pillar of fire. That's the words. A pillar is a column, right? It's an erect form, okay? And that's like a man. In fact, let me show you something. Here at the Red Sea, this is compared with the tabernacle pattern. Go over here on this picture. You've got the tabernacle pattern, you've got the migratory pattern. Most holy place, court round about, promised land, wilderness of Sinai, Egypt. Okay? Now, the veils are in here. Second veil would be as the Jordan River. First veil would be as the Red Sea. And Yahweh opened up the Red Sea for a passage. So that's what a veil is. It's a division and a passage from one point to the next, and so forth. Now, when he divided the waters of the Red Sea, that pillar of cloud, that pillar of fire, because they came through by night, it said that that angel in that pillar of fire was leading the children of Israel. And when he opened up the Red Sea, it says that he crossed from in front of the children of Israel to behind the children of Israel. So that what happens is, here's the children of Israel, the pillar of cloud or pillar of fire is leading them. They're in the open Red Sea. Okay? So they're in the open Red Sea. The waters are a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left, and they're in the Red Sea. The pillar of fire is leading them, and it says he crossed from in front of them to behind them. And then Paul writes about it that they were under the cloud and baptized in the sea. So when they are under the cloud and the pillar of fire is there in the cloud, then it says also that that angel or pillar of fire stood between the camp of the Israelites and the camp of the Egyptians, and he was darkness to the Egyptians and light by night to the children of Israel. Can you picture that? Look here, see? See the circle in the Red Sea? This circle has light on this side, darkness on this side. That's a phenomenal day because it's light by night. That's a phenomenal day. Yahweh called the light day, the darkness he called night. And this is done by his angel who is Joshua, the angel of Yahweh, Yahweh Elohim. Now, so what he's doing is he's standing between them, and he's got one of them on the one side that he's giving light to, one on the other side that's in darkness, and it's at the point where he crosses. Right? Okay, watch. This pillar of fire, this is Joshua, and I guess I got to go to this point before I forget about it. Joshua fulfilled that. This was a phenomenal day. Where was a phenomenal day with Joshua? When he's on the cross. Because at noontime, it turned pitch black dark. Right? So that's a phenomenal, and then it turned light again. So that's a phenomenal day in a day. Right? And Joshua, when he's crucified, he has one thief and robber on one hand, or one side of him crucified, another on the other side, right? The one taunted him and rejected him, and the other said, Master, right? He repents, right? And Joshua said to him, I say today that thou shalt be with me in paradise, which means in the garden. I want you to understand that. I'm not going to explain in great detail. But the word paradise means in the garden. And of course, this was the garden, a symbol of paradise. The garden of delights, or the garden of Eden. But Yahshua the Messiah, when he was buried and raised, where was the tomb? In the garden. And of course, that's where they put the burial sites, was typically in a garden. Right? So I say today that thou shalt be with me in paradise. But the point is, you can see the principle that at the cross, he is light to one, darkness to another. You see Joshua fulfilling? Setting up back here? Okay, so now, here in the tabernacle, let's look at the door. Okay? Here at the door, which is compared with the Red Sea, I told you there was the pillar of fire here at the door. Okay? Well, how many pillars did Yahweh have in this tabernacle at this second veil area? No, ma'am. That was at the gate. There was 10 pillars at the gate, which is at the outside part here, like here. But I'm talking about this area right here where the veil would be. How many? 5. Now think about that just a minute. I've got 5 pillars across there, right? Now, how do you position 5 pillars equally? You got to have 1 on each corner. That's 2. That leaves 3, right? And then you've got 2 more part way in. That's 4. Where's the 5th? Right in the middle. Right in the doorway. Right? So you've got a pillar in the door. But there's a unique thing about that particular pillar. You see, that pillar moved. Now that pillar that moved was actually the priest. Because when the priest stood in the doorway and he was anointed, he was the pillar. Okay? And that refers to Yahshua the Messiah, who is the pillar of the assembly, and the pillar and the ground of truth. Okay? So he, the priest, is a symbol of Yahshua the Messiah as that pillar. Okay? Make sense? Okay? So that's something to look at here in correlation with your migration and your tabernacle pattern. All right. But let's go back and read on in Ezekiel.
And he put forth the form of an hand.
Now he put forth the form of a hand. Oh, wait a minute. What do you see here in this circle?
A hand.
A hand. You're reading way down here in Ezekiel, in this vision. He put forth the form of a hand. Okay? Go ahead and read.
And he took me by a lock of mine head.
And he took me by a lock of mine head. Go ahead.
And the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven.
And Yahweh, with his hand, he raised him up. Don't you see how Yahweh said that he, by a strong right arm and by his right hand, he saved them and brought them out of Egypt? Right. And he brought them out on eagle's wings? Right. Okay? So you're seeing confirmation of this in the book of Ezekiel, and Yahshua the Messiah will be the fulfillment of it. Go ahead and read.
And brought me in the visions of Elohim to Jerusalem.
Now he brought me in the visions of Elohim up here to Jerusalem. This is where they had built the temple, and this is where they Yahweh had told them, and we're going to get into this a little bit, that Yahweh was going to completely take them out of Jerusalem, and that Yahweh was actually going to leave his own temple. Yahweh was leaving his temple, and the reason he was leaving his temple was because they had put an idol in the temple and were worshiping that idol in place of Yahweh. So what Yahweh was going to do was leave them desolate. So that idol put in the temple was the abomination of desolation. Okay? Please continue and read.
To the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy.
Now, in this city, there, the gate of the temple toward the north, was the seat of a false idol, an image of jealousy that they had placed there. Go ahead and read.
Which provoketh to jealousy.
That provoked Yahweh to jealousy. Go ahead.
And behold, the glory of Yahweh of Israel was there.
Now, Yahweh's glory, Yahshua, that pillar of fire, he was still there at this point in the vision. Go ahead.
According to the vision that I saw in the plain.
Correct.
Then said he unto me, Son of man, lift up thine eyes now the way toward the north. So I lifted up mine eyes the way toward the north, and behold, northward at the gate of the altar, this image of jealousy in the entry.
Yes, right in the gate of the altar of Yahweh's house, in Yahweh's own house. Right? They put an idol in Yahweh's temple. Okay? Go ahead and read.
He said furthermore unto me, Son of man, seest thou what they do? Even the great abominations that the house of Israel committeth here.
Now Yahweh is showing to Ezekiel the reason why Yahweh is so angry with them. This is the reason why Yahweh is going to leave them, leave his own house, leave them desolate, and have them taken out of the promised land. Okay? It's because of all these abominations, okay, that they are doing. And he's showing Ezekiel what they're doing. The thing of it is, many of these abominations have been done more or less behind closed doors. But Yahweh is going to show Ezekiel exactly what happened. Go ahead and read.
That I should go far off from my sanctuary.
You see why I'm going to leave my temple? Okay? Go ahead and read.
But turn thee yet again, and if thou shalt see greater abominations.
Okay.
And he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall.
Okay.
Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. And when I digged in the wall, behold, a door.
So now he's able to dig in the wall and look into what they're trying to do, thinking that they're being hidden from the face of Yahweh. Go ahead and read.
And he said unto me, Go in, and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable beasts and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about.
In other words, what they have done is they brought in all these unclean beasts into Yahweh's house, and they are now worshiping unclean beasts in Yahweh's house, and they've even put them on the walls of his house. Okay? He's not done yet. Go ahead.
And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel.
Now these are like the 70 elders back here, which is like the 70 people sitting on the Sanhedrin council that got Joshua, sent him over to the Romans to be crucified and beat up Peter and James and John and did all the things that they did. Okay? So he says, I saw 70 men of the ancients of Israel. These are the leaders of Israel. Right. Go ahead.
And in the midst of them stood Jahazananiah, the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up.
So in other words, these are the offerings supposedly of prayers. But they're praying unto these beasts and idols. And they're doing it in Yahweh's house. These are Yahweh's priests or Levites, and they are doing this more or less in the name of Yahweh, but they are worshiping false images. Right. Go ahead and read.
Then said he unto me, Son of man, Hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the chambers of his imagery? For they say, Yahweh seeth us not.
Yeah.
Yahweh hath forsaken the earth.
Wow. Go ahead.
He said also unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do.
Right?
Then he brought me to the door of the gate of Yahweh's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz.
Now, what does that mean? There sat women weeping for Tammuz. What is this? What does this mean? You got to know something about Tammuz and what weeping for Tammuz means.
Right.
What does it mean?
It's weeping for the son that died, and the son of Nimrod.
Right. Tammuz was actually the bastard son
Right.
of Nimrod. He
Right.
was not really Nimrod's son,
No.
according to the ancient legend. Now, let me explain, because maybe not everybody knows who Nimrod is and all this, so I'm going to go to this Daniel chart over here. Okay? See, Satan is always trying to build himself a kingdom. He's always trying to be God. He's always trying to take the image and always trying to take the worship of Yahweh, take the credit of Yahweh, and so forth. So he builds the city of Enoch by Cain. He builds the city of Nimrod here, and the tower. He was a mighty hunter before Yahweh. He was a great warrior. And he was apparently also very able to do other things with domestication of animals and be apparently a tremendous leader of people and military. And he built himself a system where he was worshipped as if he was God on earth. Okay? Shouldn't surprise you, because that's exactly what they did with all these great men like the Pharaoh. Gods on earth. Okay? And of course, even the Pope was declared to be the vicar of the Son of God on earth, or the substitute for the Son of God on earth. Their doctrine is Jesus is away. He left when he ascended on the cloud 2,000 years ago, and when he comes back, he can have his kingdom. But in the meantime, the Pope rules. Basically, that's, the idea. So this goes all the way on down. It's a custom. You understand what I'm saying? They considered, what was his name, the leader of Greece? Alexander. They considered Alexander the Great God on earth. And there was mythology that he was actually the son of Zeus. Okay? And so you go on the way down and all these things and so forth. So anyway, Nimrod has built himself up an incredible name and following and wealth and kingdom and so forth. And he is not going to believe Yahweh. He's going to build a tower for various different reasons. And it's all in contradiction to what Yahweh had said. First of all, Yahweh had told man to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. They're not filling it. They're going together in one spot. Second of all, that Yahweh had told him that after the flood he wouldn't flood the world with water again, but he's going to make himself his own way of escape, which is the tower. So anyway, Nimrod apparently was killed. And it doesn't say in the Bible who killed him or how or exactly what happened. Some people think that it was the righteous Cush that did it, okay? But it doesn't say in the Bible. But Nimrod had a wife named Semiramis. And after Nimrod was killed, Semiramis definitely did not want to be dethroned. She was Queen Bee. And she was, in fact, able to turn this death of her powerful husband into something that would enshrine her as not just God on earth, but the mother of God and the wife of God. Okay? So what she did was she had a child out of wedlock named Tammuz. And she developed this myth that says that her husband, Nimrod, who had died, sacrificed himself, and he died, buried, resurrected, and ascended to heaven. And he became the sun in the sky. And the rays of the sun was her ascended husband Nimrod, and his rays penetrated and impregnated her and caused her. Might have to get Tim over here. There we go. So the myth goes that the rays of the sun, which, like I said, was supposedly her dead, buried, resurrected, and ascended husband Nimrod, impregnated her, and then her child, Tammuz, would have been, of course, the son of God. And if she, of course, was then the mother of God, right? And, of course, the wife of God. Follow me? She was the original Madonna. Okay? She was the Madonna. And thus you have the concept of the Trinity that developed. Right? So you had the three figures, all of them in some form, separate persons, but all in some form as God. Three separate persons, but all as God. And she would, of course, then become the mediator between God and man. Do you see that? Okay. And yes, and she was called the Queen of Heaven. And this kind of mythology went throughout the entire world and came into different societies, different cultures, took different names of different deities and myths and so forth, but all had the same root. Okay? And so this Tammuz, then, what happened with Tammuz was Tammuz, according to the legend, was killed by a wild boar. Okay? And since he was the son of God and he was killed with a wild boar, then in his funeral, the women didn't just weep for him one day, they wept for him for 40 days. Okay? And they would weep and lament and go through their ritual for 40 days of mourning, weeping for Tammuz. And then after the 40 days, they would have a great feast. And you know what they did? They had ham. Because they then would show that the wild boar that killed Tammuz, that the wild boar was killed, and that they would be able to consume and eat the wild boar. You follow me? So what you had was the beginning of 40 days of weeping and fasting before Lent. 40 days of Lent, weeping and fasting before Easter. So, this is the kind of thing, when you read a little phrase in the Bible, I saw women weeping for Tammuz, now you understand a little bit about the significance of that. You understand what I'm saying? It's the same old ancient pagan idol god worship, idol worship that is strictly from Satan, that is done and it's put right into Yahweh's temple. Now you can understand why Yahweh says, I'm done with you. Follow me? I'm finished with you. Okay? I'm leaving. So I'm explaining this. This is what's going on in Ezekiel, the 8th chapter. All right, continue from where you're at.
Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these.
Wow, how do you get worse than that? Read on.
And he brought me into the inner court of Yahweh's house.
Now we brought him right into the inner court of Yahweh's house. Okay?
And behold, at the door of the temple of Yahweh.
Now at the door of the temple of Yahweh, the door faces what direction? East. Because the most holy place is on the west. And the most holy place is where Yahweh's ark is, or his throne. So Yahweh is enthroned on the west end of the house in the most holy place, or the oracle. They're out there on the east end of that, at the door of the temple of Yahweh. Please read.
Between the porch and the altar were about 25 men.
25 men. These were major, important men, leaders, priests, whatever. Go ahead.
With their backs toward the temple of Yahweh.
Now, wait a minute. Their backs are toward the temple. Their backs, they have turned their back on Yahweh sitting on the throne. You never turn your back on the king.
No.
You never turn your back on the king. In fact, the custom was always this. If you were blessed enough to ever have an audience with the king, you would always come into the king facing him, and when you left, you would always leave facing him and coming back out this way. You would never turn your back on the king. And under no circumstances would you moon him. But these men, those that are Yahweh's representatives here, they are facing toward the sun in the east. That is their God, not the son of Yahweh sitting on the throne in the west. And what are they doing? They're worshiping the sun in the east, mooning Yahweh.
And their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun toward the east.
Wow.
Then he said unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah that they commit the abominations which they commit here?
Yeah, is this something that you think I should overlook? Go ahead.
For they have filled the land with violence, and have returned to provoke me to anger.
Yep.
And lo, they put the branch to their nose.
They put the branch to the nose, and you've seen the expression of somebody going, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's like putting your middle finger up. So that's basically what they're saying to Yahweh. That's really something. In other words, they're defiant. They're set. They won't be corrected. They're defiant. Okay? Go ahead and read.
Therefore will I also deal in fury.
Yep.
Mine eyes shall not spare,
Yep.
neither will I have pity. And though they cry in mine ears with a loud voice, yet will I not hear them.
That's right. So, you see what's going on there in Ezekiel, right? And there's a whole series of things that could be involved. Now, all of this really involves one basic thing that Satan is motivating there. It's simply called idolatry. But idolatry takes many forms, and the type of idolatry that you see them physically practicing there is an example in ancient times of what Satan is really trying to do. And that is, Satan is simply trying to get Yahweh's glory. He's simply trying to take credit for what Yahweh has done. He is simply trying to be an identity thief and get Yahweh's credit. And so it shouldn't surprise you that one of the fastest growing major types of crimes down here is identity theft. Do you think a name is important? Your name and your number, right? But people say, it doesn't make any difference what you call him. Not only does it make a difference what they call you, it makes a difference if they use your name and your number. They get your name, your social security number, and have access to your credit records, and then they can pose as you and take. You follow me? Isn't that something? And that's exactly what Satan is trying to do with Yahweh. He is an identity thief. Okay? So that might give you something that kind of relates with what's going on back there. I mean, we can talk more about Ezekiel. The other part about this that I mentioned, didn't get into a lot of detail, is that first part where he talked about the man that appeared to him with the image of the pillar with the fire down and the fire up, and the body of heaven and his brightness. Okay? There's only one place in the entire King James Version where the word brightness occurs. And that is in Exodus 24, and we read this many, many, many times, and if you wouldn't mind getting Exodus 24, 9 and 10. And we're going to start to run out of time, so I'll just mention a couple of things just for later, to address later.
Exodus 24:9. Then went up Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel.
Okay, now, then went up on Mount Sinai on the plateau. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. Please read.
And they saw the Elohim of Israel.
Now they saw the Elohim of Israel. Now listen to what they describe. Please read.
And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire
You
stone.
see the feet with the sapphire stone? Go ahead.
And as it were, the body of heaven in his clearness.
And it's the body of heaven in its clearness. Okay? And by the way, I just realized I misstated something.
Yeah, you said
I think I said it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay?
But we-
I said what I said. Here's what I said that was incorrect.
brightness.
I said there's only one place in the Bible where the word brightness is used. You just read it in Ezekiel about brightness.
Right, that's
Okay?
what I was-
Hold on. There's only one place in the entire King James Bible where the word clearness
Right,
is used.
right.
And that's where you're just reading here. Under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were, the body of heaven in his clearness. But if you look up the original root word meaning of the word clearness, from the Hebrew word, it means brightness. Or brilliance. So this was that body of heaven in his brightness. In other words, with the appearance of fire from his loins down and his loins up. This was that pillar of fire, or the man that was in the pillar of fire. You follow me? And the fire is emanating, and the cloud is emanating from the man. Okay? And this is the glory of Yahweh, or the Son of Yahweh, Yahshua, the Messiah. Okay? And his body is bright above the brightness of the sun. So when they worship this as being bright, they're really worshiping something that's dark in comparison with the source of all light. This is just a type and shadow.
Right, the
It's a
shadow.
very dark shadow compared to this one.
That's right.
And in the fulfillment, you read about him having the transfigured body here, and his body and his raiment above the brightness of the sun. Right? Okay, so in other words, this bright, shining body is the source of all light, or the source of all spiritual life. See, the angels compare to the green plants, and green plants receive their energy directly from the sun.
That's right.
By the light.
Photosynthesis.
And the angels receive their life directly from the Son of Yahweh as light. And your soul is spiritual and will have, does not have, but will have in the resurrection an immortal body like unto the angels of Yahweh. So said Yahshua. And your inner being is now supposed to be receiving light directly from the Son of Yahweh by virtue of the Holy Spirit. But under the Old Testament, since they did not have the Holy Spirit, they got their inspiration from Yahweh through the angels. What does the word angel mean? Well, angels are ministering spirits, but what does the word angel mean? It means messenger of El.
That's simple.
Yeah, like an angle of light, right. So what happened was Yahweh gave the angels his message, and they ended up giving it to men. That's like you, the sun gives the energy to the green plants, and you eat the green plants to get your nutrition from them. And this is one of the reasons that green vegetation produces all kinds of things that are very healing for your physical body. See? But your soul now, if you have received the Holy Spirit, actually can get the light of the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh from Yahshua the Messiah. That's because under this age and dispensation, for those that have the Holy Spirit. There is no mediator between Yahweh and men except the man Yahshua as the Holy Spirit. And let me say this, the man Yahshua has a body, and the body was dedicated on the day of Pentecost and includes the souls of all believers as well as all of his angels. They are all part of the church, or the body of Yahshua the Messiah. And there are angels here right now.
That's right.
And they are learning with us. Get for me, if you would, try to remember, I don't have much time. But no, I'm not going to bother doing it because I'd run you out of time. It's over in Peter. It's over in Peter, the first part of Peter there,
Entertain angels on a
where he talks about, that's correct.
Oh.
Well, go ahead and get it. We'll read it real quick and then I'll finish.
You got it? Oh.
See, when you read back here, and a lot of times we don't read about it. In the wilderness of Sinai, you see in the Bible it says that that old covenant was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. And it said Yahweh Elohim appeared in the wilderness with tens, thousands of his sons, meaning his angels. You follow me? So they were there here in the wilderness. The angels were part of this church body. And it's in the Bible. Go ahead and read.
1 Peter 1:12. Unto whom it was revealed that not unto themselves, but unto us they did minister the things which are now reported unto you by them that have preached the gospel unto you with the Holy Ghost, sent down from heaven.
So now he's talking about under this dispensation, the things that the angels gave and that were reported by the prophets back there, those things are now given unto you by those that have the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven. Please read.
Which things the angels desire to look into.
And even the angels desire to look into the things that are now being reported unto you. They're learning right along with you, because Yahweh has not revealed every part of his purpose yet to everyone. But and I just say this, as he reveals more, and Yahweh continues to reveal, those angels are here. And I want you to understand something so that you're just not confused and don't get all just unhinged. Satan has a reserved seat here.
Right.
And you're not going to get rid of him.
No.
He's got a reserved seat.
He's a son too.
And he is a son of Yahweh too. A bastard, but a son. Right? Because he won't acknowledge his father. And that word's in the Bible. And that's what he says. Because he will not be chastised. He will not be corrected.
Right.
And he says if he will not be corrected, he's a bastard and not a son. That's the way it talks about it. But he's got a reserved seat. And the reason, and I'll tell you, he makes it. You know why? He wants to learn everything he can so that he can deceive even more. Satan has always used the words of Yahweh to deceive. And it says there in Thessalonians, Paul writes about it, that Yahweh would give him power, all power, to show signs and miracles so that he could deceive. So Satan is no little punk.
But he is.
And I tell you this too, another thing that you need to understand. Satan saw this vision up here on Mount Sinai. It says it in the Bible. It says he was upon the holy mountain of Elohim. Right back here. Okay? Satan's no punk. Okay? And if you're not aware of this, you think you come in here and everything is supposed to be wonderful. I'm telling you, that's like coming out of Egypt, getting in the wilderness, and thinking, oh, now everything is great. No, this is where the chastisement took place. This is where the change had to take place. Do you follow me? This is where they had to face the problems that they had internally. See what I'm saying? Here they were able to project it on the Egyptians externally. Here they got to deal with it in themselves. And that's what's going on now, because this is where you're at right now in here. Okay? Now, as soon as we get the lesson learned, we can all go home. But I'll say you the last thing. As Joshua said, and Dr. Kinney had this as the theme of what he called the final international convention, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. And it's not coming until this gospel of the kingdom is preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. Then the end can come. It's not coming beforehand. When the last soul is added to this body, then we can all go home. So I hope that's of encouragement, and praise Yahshua.
Thank you, Dr. Welsh. That brings a close to our class for today. Are there any comments or questions? Class announcements are as follows. Classes are held every Wednesday.